Welcome to episode 19 of Keepin It a Hundo. Today's guest is Che Scott. He's the author of the new Guy Code. He's also known for his TED Talk, and he's the team chaplain for the Miami Heat. I went to University of Miami with Che. He's a friend of mine. We played on a lot of basketball teams together. As a matter of fact, the last team we played on together, Che ruptured his patella tendon. It was a pretty gruesome injury, and I had to help carry him off the court. So needless to say, we haven't been on the court together in a while. We've both been dealing with some injuries. We recently got together in Miami to discuss his book, The New Guy Code, about his abstinence, how tough it is to just say no to these women in Miami. More importantly, about how boys should be treating girls starting at a young age and how men should be treating women. Che is definitely an anomaly in many different ways. And there are challenges that come along with it, as we discuss. But I think Che's a natural leader, and it's not that difficult for him to live a life that's very different than the average man. I can't say I agree with Che on everything, and I definitely don't live the same as Che, but I've always admired him, and I respect him. And I've always enjoyed talking to him and picking his brain about what's his motivation behind the way he lives. So sitting down with him was a treat, and I apologize that we went a little bit long today. I hope everybody had a happy 4th. And now that the Celtics own the East for the next several years, LeBron is gone. So on to the podcast. I really pride myself in having guests on the show that are different. And Che is exactly that. He's very different. Well, for one, he's on the opposite end of the scale from last week's guest, Diamond. But even to a person like me or my peers or our peers, his lifestyle is quite different in many ways, even though we have a lot of parts of our lives that intersect. There's the basketball and the travel. I mean, we even live in the same neighborhood. We live in walking distance of each other. But I challenge you today to listen to this conversation with Che and try to gain something from it and try to put it into use in your own life. He's an example of someone who's not just talking about it, but he's actually doing it. He makes the world a better place. I'm very confident in saying that. Here's my conversation with Che Scott.
1 in the air for the people ain't here. 2 in the air for the father that's there. 3 in the air for the kids in the ghetto. 4 for the kids that don't want to be there. None for the niggas trying to hold him back. 5 in the air for the teacher not scared to tell those kids that's living in the ghetto that the niggas holding back, that the world is theirs. Yeah, the world is yours. I was once that little boy, terrified of the world. Now I'm on a world tour. I will give up everything, even start a world war. For these ghetto girls and boys I'm rapping around the world for. Africa to New York, Haiti then I detour, Oakland out to Oakland, Gaza Strip to Detroit. Say hip hop only destroy. Tell them look at me, boy. I hope your son don't have a gun and never be a D-boy.
So I'd like to start today talking about something that's relevant in the news right now. It's very disturbing.
Okay.
And I think you know this person, Kellen Winslow.
Yeah, man.
So I've been reading the articles. I'm disgusted. I'm disappointed.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't know him. I was, around him at times, being at school and whatnot, playing basketball or in the gym. And I've heard personal stories about him and his character and whatnot. And I just wanted to get your take on it. Were you teammates with him at one point?
Yeah, obviously, the brief time that I was at the University of Miami, when I was with the football team, I did know him. And, obviously I saw the news this weekend, and it's certainly troubling. Now, I'll say that everything is fresh and new, so we don't really know anything. There's very limited amount of information.
You can't convict him yet. But.
Yeah, exactly. So I hope what we're seeing is not true, and that could be my only hope, not only from a human perspective, but from the perspective of what we're talking about today and what I'm about. Yeah, obviously you can't help but be troubled by the allegations.
Just to let the listeners in on it, they might not be as up to date with this stuff as we are considering our ties to University of Miami. And Kellen Winslow II played at Miami back when, I think, was he your year?
Yeah, well, I was there 02, 03, so he was a year, I think, 01 through 05, actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
So he came in right around the same time as, is it Shea or Che?
Che.
Okay, because I hear people say both. I say Che.
And I never correct anybody, so that's why.
Today's guest is Che Scott. Are you currently the team chaplain with the Heat? Or former team chaplain?
Yeah, I'm still with the Heat.
Still with the Heat?
Yeah.
That's great. Authored 2 books. We're going to talk about a couple of those. A little further with the Kellen Winslow thing, just so people know what we're talking about. He's basically been targeting elderly women to sexually assault and, indecent exposure, to rape, to assault, to very disturbing things we've been hearing. And, he's a star football player at Miami and had a great NFL career. His dad is a prestigious member of the community in San Diego and a Hall of Fame football player. Just hope the stuff's not true, but yeah, so that leads me to the next topic, which is mental illness.
Yeah.
And I feel like if this is true, this is some form of mental illness.
Yeah.
This is not someone being, arrogant or, being a spoiled, athlete or something. And I think some of these outlets that we've been seeing lately, as far as the suicides and this type of behavior, it's troubling. And we spoke at lunch about how you kind of foresaw these things.
Yeah.
With based on the country's divide. I mean, it kind of parallels the country.
Yeah, I think so. I think we're becoming not necessarily a color barrier or anything like that, but we're becoming segregated as a society. And again, not segregation like apartheid or segregation as we know it, where it's black and white, but I think just being segregated as people. I think we isolate very easily, even though we have so many norms of communication. I think we constantly feel like we're being left out of something. People always post the good stuff about their lives, and so it's pretty normal to sit there and say, well, all this stuff is happening. This person is traveling here and doing this and doing that, and I'm not doing anything. So we kind of depress ourselves, constantly picking up the phone every morning. First thing that we're doing is scrolling and seeing what everybody else is, what's going on and what happened last night and what I didn't get invited to. So we are struggling socially, and I think we are facing a lot of issues with depression.
Furthering the point on mental illness and depression, I don't know how close you were. I know you were pretty close to the situation with Abeku.
Yeah.
And we had a friend, like I said, Che was closer to him than I was. I used to just play basketball with him, and I knew him through friends. Again, another situation of mental illness, I believe.
Yeah.
He basically committed suicide, and did he kill 1 or 2 people?
Yeah, double murder and suicide.
Double murder, suicide at a Equinox?
Yeah. In
Coral Gables, Florida, last year, I think.
Yeah, it's funny because it's actually a day before my birthday, so every birthday I always have to, so April 8th. And obviously I think there were certainly deeper issues that maybe we could have seen some stuff on the surface, but I think there's some stuff that no one could have seen. And obviously you hurt for all the families because I knew everyone involved. I knew Abeku.
You worked out of the gym, right?
Yeah, exactly. So I knew everyone involved. So you grieve for their family who lost their son, their daughters, their spouses by being murdered, and then you also grieve for Abeku's family as well too, and because obviously he has a family as well too, and his mom, who I keep in contact with. Sometimes is she grieves as well too, and she's a person, and she lost a son as well too, and that's what's tough about all the stuff that we see. And even going back to what's happening with what we talked about with Kellen, when we talk about these issues of mental illness, I think so many things happen, and we can easily look at the evil that's being done, and obviously those things have to be corrected, and people have to be held accountable for their behavior. But I do think that we have to start to figure out what's going on with people, because none of these behaviors from either individual reflect who we knew them to be, Which
that brings up my point. Unless you've known somebody who's maybe been one of the perpetrators of a crime like this or this type of tragedy, you don't realize these are seemingly normal people that are well-adjusted and good people and people you can count on for things, and these aren't raving lunatics. And they, there's illness involved that just sends them in a different direction. There's got to be a way to correct this, though, and I just don't know what the answer is.
Yeah, and I think that there has to be a way to do it, and I try to, whenever I'm asked these questions, not to go off on these assumptions, but there are things that you do notice, and I do believe that part of one of the things that we are struggling socially, and this idea, I think. One of the things, not only are we divided as a culture, I think there's issues with materialism. There's so many different things that capture our attention. And basically, we are not as introspective society. We don't look within as often. And the reason why I'm saying this is that I think we're struggling with so many things socially. And we have this idea that we don't have, and we need this, and we do that, and I think we're driving ourselves crazy. I'm saying that because I spend time in societies and countries and in cultures that are a lot less well off than we are, and I don't see the same level of depression or stress and people saying I need this, or I'm bummed out or whatever. As a matter of fact, you often find. You go to a different part of the world, you see a woman carrying a bucket of water on her neck for almost a mile, and she's still smiling at you. You know what I mean?
Like she doesn't know about depression.
Exactly, right? Exactly. And the guy driving down the street in a Mercedes is like flipping you off, because he's 5 minutes late.
Yep.
Exactly. So I think there's certainly something that we have to address of what's really important.
I saw a study recently that was interesting. It was about income related to depression.
Yeah.
And it's basically like, as long as you make enough money to have the needs, which they said the point was right around $75,000 a year or something.
Right.
And then it goes up to about maybe 175, 200. Those people are happy. Yeah. And then beyond that, there's a lot of depression, suicide's higher, all that stuff. And we know that because those people have more stress. They have a higher standard to meet in their eyes. Interesting.
No, it's and it's funny because whenever the issue with material things and with money, and it's not a bad thing. I think it provides us the opportunity to do a lot of things. It gives us the ability to help others, and it and it helps us to live out some of our own personal dreams. But I do see it can become a trap where it becomes one of those things where I never have enough. And if that becomes the end goal, then there's never a billion's not going to be enough, because you're a billion, then I need 1,000,000,001, and then I need 1,000,000,002. And so if that's the end goal, I don't think you're ever going to be happy. So I do agree with you on that.
I realized a while ago that the reason why I want to accumulate a certain amount of money is so I can do things like a podcast.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be able to do this if I was grinding, working 80 hours a week and paycheck to paycheck. I've got to a point where I can do something like a podcast that I'm passionate about, that I'm making $0 doing, actually losing a little money doing. But I enjoy it and I want to do it.
Yeah.
This is why having money is a good thing. Exactly. You can do the things that bring you joy, whether it's travel or a hobby or
I agree, and and there's a difference between, ambition is not a bad thing. I actually I'm a big proponent of, I'll say it this way. I've seen way too many people without much values who are incredibly driven and motivated and ambitious, and I've seen really good people who have no drive and ambition. So unfortunately, we sometimes live in a world and society is run by people who have a lot of ambition but no morals, no values, and then you have good people who just sit on the side. So I'm very big on seeing people with good values, good morals, be driven to want to do things too.
Yeah, it'd be nice to have those two things coexist.
Yeah,
it's funny, marriage. Like a lot of the things that you say, like you speak about society as a whole divided, and then you speak about what you just said about the part about leaders and people in high positions not having morals. Everything, like I can't help but like trump Everything just leans to me towards Trump.
Exactly.
And you said something in one of your TED Talks about, I think it's from one of your books, you spoke about in the TED Talk about building a wall to protect your girl or your daughter.
Yeah.
And it was in 2015 you gave that talk. And then next thing you know, the country is talking about building a wall to keep out Mexicans and whatnot.
Yeah.
But what you said was, instead of building a wall, build culture and build values.
Yeah, exactly.
And which is what we should be doing with other countries, especially the ones we border.
Right.
Instead of keeping them out.
Absolutely, and that's the challenging part of, because I have, obviously I'm a part of who I am is my own personal spiritual beliefs and stuff like that. There's so much there. So one of the things that I don't make a habit of bashing leaders or bashing politicians or anything like that, because one of the things I also don't know what it's like to be in that position. I don't know what it's like to make a decision that affects 1 billion people, not just in our country but in other countries. Let me say this, if we're going to ask the question about politics, and I've said this, that I do believe that politicians and leaders reflect society, and when we look at our leaders, then we should look, we're saying we're looking at ourselves in the mirror, whether we want to say we agree with this person or not. How does a person become in that position? If we say this person, and I'm not saying anyone else, if we say this person is low on values, if we say that they're selfish, if we say that they're greedy, if we say all these things, how do they come to that position unless society has somewhat shifted in that direction? So I think that's where it is. So I think overall, if we focus ourselves on our values, then I think our leaders will reflect the values, good or bad.
I think it's a good point, and it's a pretty strong metaphor for us as a whole.
Yeah.
So let's talk more specifically about your passions. Let's speak about your book, the New Guy Code.
Okay.
What is the New Guy Code?
By
your words.
Yeah, by definition, it's a renewed vision for male interaction as it relates to females. So we basically, I'll say this: unfortunately, when we are training as boys, I think somewhere about between 12 and 14, we start to really engage with girls, and there's not too much teaching going on. There's nobody there saying this is how you should do it. And what happens is normally there's a boy or two that's in the crowd who has a little bit more experience than the rest of us, and then he starts to tell us this is what you need to do. So ultimately, the first teaching that we get about our interaction with girls is about what we need to do to them so that you could come back to the group and report what you did. You know what I mean? So it's really just a report card. It's a reporting system.
Yeah.
And so there's no one that teaches us that at that time that, well, they're people, they're humans, they have families, they're people, they have people that care about them. There are our mothers, there are our sisters, there are our daughters. And so if this is our teaching and this is what we're taught from the onset, it's not surprising that we have so many issues where even as men we can't hang around with a group of guys without somebody saying something bad about a girl or reporting back about what he did to this girl or whatever, So I think it's just trying to change that whole narrative, and then trying to explain the social issues that come with that when we don't address these.
What was your spiritual awakening you had in college where you changed your whole mindset towards women and towards premarital sex and things like that?
Yeah.
Because you've basically gone abstinent since then, correct?
Yeah, and it's not, and obviously, I try to be honest and open with everything that I do. That obviously abstinence is an absolute struggle, even with spiritual beliefs. So I have even found it in the past 2 years of my life to be one of the most challenging things. So it's funny. The past 2 years have been way more difficult than the previous 10 years, and I don't know if it's fatigue, I don't know if it's just, getting a little bit older. And so one of the things that I always try to be clear and upfront, that is my own personal beliefs, is that, sex is better off in a committed relationship. So that certainly is my belief there.
That brings me to my next question. How do you view monogamous relationships? People who are committed to each other, that not married,
yeah,
don't have children together. They're just monogamous, sex is a big part of relationships.
Yeah, no, you're right.
And a healthy part.
Absolutely. And, you're asking some tough questions, man. And, but I like it. I like it. I don't think it's my place. I think, again, I come from a background spiritually where my belief and our belief is that sex operates better in the commitment of marriage. Now, we do live in a society, in a city, in a world that is, one, here are some challenges. People don't get married as early as they used to. People are very afraid that they're thinking like, well, I don't really like this person, but I just want to have sex. And it's not even really that. There are people that are really afraid of, well, I was married before and this is what happened and I can't just jump back into a marriage because I want to have sex. So I trust me, man. I'm living it myself as a single person, that it's incredibly, incredibly challenging. These are things that I have to think about, like, okay, can I date her? Can I date her? Can I date, those kinds of things. So that's, I don't know if I have the easy answer for you, but I would say this, that sex is, in my opinion, better in a committed relationship,
I agree.
Yeah.
There is some confusion with me. I don't know if confusion is the word. Maybe differing value system or something.
Right.
If I am in a committed relationship with somebody, monogamous relationship, fully respecting the woman with every intention to follow through with this woman to the furthest point.
Right.
I want to, we have our goals are to, first become monogamous or committed, then become maybe engaged, then married, then children. If those are our goals and that's what we're working towards, am I tainting that woman by engaging in sex before we get to that point? Because what I've read in your books is if you, basically have sex with women that you don't marry or whatever, you're kind of tainting them for later on.
No, and you have to understand that the new guy code, my focus is so you're in a different life stage, when you're 20, you're 30 than when you're 14 years old.
Yep.
So
the guy code is more targeted towards boys.
Yeah, we're trying to see how do we shape a generation of men. Now, obviously, if a 16-year-old boy sleeping with every girl in his high school, he's probably not gonna marry one of them, necessarily. And ultimately, there's so much damage that can happen in at that stage of your life. You
think basically like holding out as long as you can, like to not having this reckless exploration of sex as a young kid or teenager or
absolutely
like that.
Absolutely. I don't think
now I'm not saying I agree, but that makes a lot more sense to me.
And I don't know that it's healthy at any age, to be honest with you, because I don't think that I had a friend years ago and he was working with this company and he was doing really well with the company. That one of the things that they would do as a reward, especially for the male employees, they would take them to these strip clubs. And when they went to these strip clubs, they wouldn't even give him money because he was taking the money and not even participating. So eventually they started just giving them credit instead of strip club. So he found himself like in these relationships with these workers, I guess, if you want to call them that. So he calls me one day and middle of the night, and he says, I'm struggling because I used to feel bad when I did this, and he had a girlfriend at the time. Now I don't feel bad anymore. And what I told him was this, is that it's not necessarily that what you're doing is no longer causing pain. It's just that you've paralyzed the emotion to feel the pain. Mm-hmm. So if I hit my hand with a hammer,
like desensitizing.
Exactly. So you hit yourself with a hammer. The first time you're gonna feel it. The 5th time you're gonna feel it. The 200th time you don't feel it anymore, but you're still messing up your hand.
Exactly.
So I don't think, and maybe it's just me. Maybe there's a part of me, and I can't say what another guy feels. I can't say what another girl feels. I know when I've crossed that line sexually with a person, it's hard for me to just say, okay, well, that was that, And so for me, it's a little bit more emotional. It's a little bit more care for the individual. So for me, I would say personally, I try not to put myself in that situation because I can't just get up and just say, well, okay, well, that was just sex. Let's just be friends. Let's just, I'll see you when I see you.
So how much has this affected your relationships? How does this affect your interactions with women that you're interested in?
Oh, I mean, I think it's affected it. I don't think, it doesn't affect me in the way that I say, well, okay, well, I'm going to make a decision to go in another direction. But at the same time, on the positive side, it's helped me to weed out some people. Sometimes there are girls that come to me with intentions.
Yeah.
And, I think when that position is laid before them, how I feel about, then I think you start to see certain things, people pull away or something like that. So it's
Can you kind of just tell when your values don't align?
Yeah.
And then it's kind of like, okay, I see this is not going to work for us.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's a good litmus test for me to see what a person, what a person values. And I'm not saying necessarily that I'm better than them or whatever, or I think less of them, but I have seen it where...
It's funny you say that because I notice a lot of times with like, you're the type of guy who I may, at a younger age, I would get these feelings towards guys who don't drink, guys who are abstinent, guys who don't curse. And it's like, I feel like I'm being judged.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or like someone who's super religious.
Yeah.
You feel like you're being judged. Like, oh, this guy is weaker than me. He can't reach this spiritual level that I'm at. Right. Like I can abstain from sex or alcohol or cursing. And I've always felt this, like, I think it's common to feel kind of like, not like, oh, he's better than me, but it's like it's almost that. Like he looks at me differently.
No,
not as a peer.
No, what I have my... I think you can say we've known each other for a long time.
Yeah, maybe 15 years or something.
Yeah, exactly. And I would say even probably the vast majority of my friends don't necessarily always believe what I believe.
Sure.
My best friend, we're not on the same level spiritually. I wouldn't even probably even say sometimes morally,
Yeah.
But that's my friend. I don't need people to believe what I believe, but they should know that I believe. So what I would say more than anything, I don't
believe in you.
Yeah. Would you, in the time that we've known each other, I think you're pretty sure what I believe. You don't have to doubt that. Like, I think there's been a consistent, that, I probably wouldn't even be on your podcast today if you didn't see a consistent, if you saw that I was saying this, but you knew
acting a different way.
Exactly. Then we wouldn't even be having this conversation.
I've seen you get kind of wild on the basketball.
Yeah, that's right. That's why I avoid it, right?
A little bit.
Exactly, right?
No, your behavior has always been consistent since I've known you. I don't doubt you. I admire it. At the same time, I have a million questions.
Yeah.
Because it's impressive and at the same time confusing.
Right, exactly. And I think that's where I've never said, went out and said, well, I need to do this or I need to change this person's way of thinking. I think my life, and I think which is the model of Jesus. Jesus loved people and he cared about people. And I think he cared about people in such a radical way that people wanted to model that same kind of behavior. There's a guy named C.S. Lewis, an amazing Christian author. And he says of all the virtues of a Christian life, purity is by far the toughest. It's the most challenging. And so when you go to these kids camp and you have these parents and they're hammering their kids like, don't have sex, don't have sex, don't have sex. Wait till you're married. And the kid says, did you guys wait till you were married? And he's like, nah. Even if they wish they did, they know that it's incredibly challenging. So I don't want anyone to hear me saying, well, this is just something so simple. I'm telling you that even for me, the past 2 years of trying to be this person has been the most difficult in my entire life. You know what I mean?
Has it been specific situations? Like, are you dating someone and you just know that that's the next step? Kind of, it feels natural maybe for it to be the next step. And then does the relationship kind of end?
No, I mean, there are times where lines have been crossed. There are times that, I'll say this. It's important that I follow through on my side of it if I'm going to tell you that that's what it is. So I'm not telling you that you need to do what I do. But if I told you that I'm going to do it, it's important that I follow through on my side. And I think that's an integrity thing. Going back to what I was saying as well, that I have a deep admiration for people who not necessarily believe what I believe, but people who say that they're doing something but actually follow through on it. You know what I mean? So I'm very drawn to people who pursue what they say they're after. You know what I mean? So when you're driving up 95, say that I'm a follower of Christ. But if I see somebody who says, man, I'm an artist, and I see that guy on the side of the road painting, and he's committed to his art, I admire that, because he is doing what he said. He or she is doing what they say that they're committed to.
So, which brings me to something that I think connects us. Yeah. My monogamy in my current relationship. I can hold my head up high. I have a certain amount of pride knowing that I treat my girlfriend the right way.
Absolutely.
There's nobody out there who's going to listen to this podcast and say otherwise.
Exactly.
Because I don't, so I don't feel uncomfortable saying that. I've never strayed in my relationship, and there's a certain amount of pride involved in that, and I know the pride that you have, achieving what you've achieved over the past 12, 13 years.
Yeah. Well, the pride and the struggle, I would say the pride for me, I think what keeps me, I guess, focused more than anything, it's not necessarily for me to tell a story, but I'll say this from a new guy code perspective. There are a lot of women, and obviously coming off of a Me Too movement, who, and I've seen this, who are just craving to have a guy around them who's just not trying to sleep with them. You know what I mean? Yeah. And I don't know if
objectifying them.
Exactly. And Dave Chappelle, in his, I don't know if you saw one of his last stand-ups, but he was talking about the Me Too thing, and when he had to walk home with a bunch of money. And he talked about that one time he had to walk about how insecure he felt that somebody would, and he said, imagine having to walk around your whole life with something that somebody wants,
Yes.
And basically he talked about the female, the vagina. And he says, because again, going back to our teaching as males, we believe that it's our whole passion in life is to get to that woman and to take advantage of her. What happens after that? We've never really thought that far ahead, but we need to get to her body. And so I think for me, the value in knowing that there are probably women out there who say, well, I don't understand Che. There are probably some who question the validity. There's some who question if I'm gay. But I'll say this, the women that I know, they may question why I do it, but they'll never question my character. And so they'll never say, well, Che took advantage of me.
Right.
Well, Che, you know what I mean?
Right.
And I can say this, that in at least for that moment, being a guy who can see value in them more than trying to sleep with them, I can say that I invested in her life, whether somebody believes in that perspective or not.
That reminds me of a situation I was in, I don't know, a few years back. And I was talking to a girl, getting to know her. We hung out a couple times. We weren't sleeping together. We weren't committed or anything.
Yeah.
She came over late one night after a trip. And she came by. I told her I was tired. I was going to bed soon, but she's welcome to stop by. She stopped by. I had no intentions of anything. My intentions were, I haven't seen her in a while. It'd be nice to see her. So she comes by and she says, I'm really tired. I don't feel like driving home. Fine, you can stay over, no problem. So I just wasn't at that point with this girl yet. So we go to sleep, and she sleeps on her side, and I sleep on my side, and I don't try to do anything. Right. So the reason why this is interesting to me is because it relates to situations you've been in, and it's also comes full circle with the podcast. Yeah. This girl had a podcast. She didn't know I knew about. We never spoke about her podcast. Yeah. But I found it because we were Facebook friends, and she posted them on Facebook. So I decided to listen to one. Yeah. And she starts telling the story about this guy. I really liked him, blah, blah, blah. I stopped by the house. And, we went to bed, and he didn't try to sleep with me. Right. And she questioned my sexuality. Right. Maybe he had an STD. What else was it? Oh, he doesn't know how to handle a black woman. Yeah. Listen, I have a resume. Yeah, I'll show it to you. Little she know, right? Right. It was nuts to me that this is, she's putting it, granted, she didn't put my name out there, but she's putting it out there for public consumption that I may be these things. And it's hurtful. Yeah. And so I can only imagine you've heard plenty of those things before.
I had a situation once, and this is a great friend of mine, right? And that we were, talking through, should we, is this something more than a friendship, potentially starting to date. And when we first started getting to know each other, I wasn't sure if I was interested in her. As a matter of fact, I wasn't interested in her, So I noticed a little bit of a distance in coming between us. I couldn't understand it. And when we had the conversation about what happened, and she basically said to me that she didn't feel like I was interested because of my lack of physical, not being physical with her. You know what I mean? Like she expected me to come on to her.
That's how you show interest.
Exactly. So what I said, I flipped the situation on her. All right. So I was like, I wasn't sure if I was interested. So therefore, I didn't want to do something where, in the end, I come off as I'm doing something and then tell you that I'm no longer interested. I'm not interested.
I can't follow through with what my body's doing.
Exactly. So so let the opposite happens. Let's say the opposite happens. Okay, let's just do whatever you want to do. Let's follow through. Let's have sex. Let's do whatever you want to do. And then I come back to you and say, well, I'm not sure if I'm interested. Would we still be friends today? So she may not have.
You're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't.
And she didn't understand my action at the time. But the only reason she still respects me today is because I did what she didn't expect me to do.
And I think it hurts them in the short term, but in the long run, they're going to like and respect you more.
Yeah, and I share this in the second edition New Guy Code book. There is all kinds of stories, but I think one of the proudest personal moments for me. There was a girl years ago. We've all had situations where girls are a little bit too crazy about us. And this girl was crazy about me. Everything I wrote or said, she made a comment about. And I knew that I could do whatever or have her do whatever I wanted, And there were times, honestly, where I was just like, it's a boring Friday night. Let me just give her a call. Let's just go hang out with her. I know she'd do whatever I want to anyways, right? Yeah. But it never happened. I never got to that point where I did that. Probably a couple months later, whether it's a year later, she had gotten over me and realized I wasn't budging at the time. But I realized she started to hang out with this other dude. This dude is madly in love with her. They're married now, very happily married now. Now, imagine me in that time. Okay, here's this girl that's crazy about me. I didn't ask her to be crazy about me.
Wasting her time.
Yeah, let me waste her time. This dude who comes along, who's right for her, comes along. She's still broken because Che did whatever he wanted to her, didn't care about her. She doesn't trust guys anymore. She's not in a place to accept that kind of love. So that whatever either doesn't happen or their marriage doesn't happen or is delayed because I felt like I should do whatever I want because she was willing. Yeah. You know what I mean? So I can look back at her and say, I'm so glad I never followed that fleshly desire because look what happened to her because I decided to do what I believe.
That's cool. Yeah. So you're out here dropping assists.
Yeah, doubles. Right, exactly.
I know you hit the boards and you get some buckets. You get an assist now.
Exactly.
That guy owes you one.
Yeah, you should. Yeah, sure it does.
So I had a stripper on last week.
Yeah,
which is a great contrast to today's guest. Could you ever date a stripper? Like, is that something that's just off the table? What if her morals and values are aligned with yours? Yeah. She doesn't sleep with people. She's abstinent. She's religious. What are the things you look for in a woman? What are the main values you look for?
Okay, let me say what are the first two things I do in the morning? The first things that I try to do in the morning, I do have my moments of reflection. So for me, I start with scripture. So I usually get up, I do a prayer, and then I read a little bit. Those are the first things. And then the second thing is the gym. So anyone do I think I need to be with someone who has that same? No, I'm an intense person. You know what I mean? Whatever I do all the way through. So I don't think I need to be with someone who's a monk or somebody who's necessarily on that level as far as doing those same things. But I think anyone who you're with has to understand that it's such a big part of who I am, So like for me, I always say, my spiritual life and my workout and exercise, that's the next thing I do in the morning, So
feed your spirit, feed your mind, feed your body.
Exactly. If she don't work out, we won't work out, So so I think those things are important to me. So I think anyone who I was with, those things she would have to understand. Now, am I here to judge anyone or to say that anything about this person who I absolutely don't even know or know anything about her? No, I I'm not here to judge anyone or to say anything negative about her, but it would hard for me to say that. I think being a stripper and me and who I am, I think you'd obviously see an obvious clash in in objectives and personality.
You ever been to a strip club?
Yeah, years ago. I think early on in college. As a matter of fact, my this is funny. So my first, I think it's like one of my first weekends in Miami when I get, so I'm around
like freshman year and
yeah. I transferred in, so I'm around
okay,
the team guys, and we go out and they're like, we're going out. So at that time, you assume everything that what everybody thinks about Miami. When you're going out, you're going to South Beach, especially at that time, early 2000s. So
you're from West Palm.
Yeah,
just
exactly.
so the listeners know. He knew a little bit about Miami, but he grew up in West Palm, which is a very different world, even though it's not that far away.
Yeah, and it's so I see the guys are going out, and I was like, this doesn't look like the route to South Beach. So we go into this bar club, and I'm like,
Coco's or Rolex? Probably one of them.
And I'm like, wow, that girl's not wearing much clothes at all. And I was like, that girl's not wearing a lot of clothes either. I'm like, this is a strip club, And then I'm not going to sit here and try to act like I'm some kind of saint, but yeah, I think in West Palm, I think I've been to one or two, but I haven't been to anywhere like that probably since 2003.
In your role as the chaplain of the Miami Heat, was there ever a pregame sermon or a speech that you gave that was very memorable, that you remember for certain reasons? Maybe the room was tense or emotional?
Well, there are two. The most awkward situations I've ever been in was during that really some of those Indiana-Miami series where those guys were just really getting at it. You guys had guys coming in the chapel with like Band-Aids on their eyes and stuff like that. And you're just sitting there like, man, dudes can start fighting right now, And so I think that was most tense. I would say the most memorable, and I share this one a lot, but he wouldn't mind me saying it. But I had an experience with Jeremy Lin years ago, and actually they did a paper on this. They did a couple stories that actually went national because Udonis shared the story.
Okay.
The Knicks are playing the Heat, and these guys come in the chapel. I think there was like 4 Knicks players that came in, and there was 3 Heat guys. And, there are a couple guys from the Knicks that you obviously recognize. And then there's this...
Can you break down the way that the chapel works?
Yeah,
Because I think most people don't really know how that...
So the NBA chapel is a function of the NBA Players Association. So it's not necessarily when we say like the Miami Heat or what I'm just here in Miami. So I'm not necessarily with the Miami Heat. I'm just an NBA chaplain in Miami. So 60 minutes before each NBA game, there's a chapel service that happens. So any player or can attend this night.
And where is this done?
Yeah, it's a room in the arena. So
does it look like
no, it's not like a building. Yeah,
kinda?
it's like for instance,
It's a piece of the locker room.
Yeah, no, it's like a separate. Like right now, where we meet is actually where the D-League teams used to play, or where the WNBA team when they were here would be here. So whatever room they designate for that function for the night, we just call it chapel. And so both teams have access to it 60 minutes before tip-off, and that usually lasts around 10 to 15 minutes. So years ago, we were playing the Knicks, and Jeremy Lin was one of the guys there. And, usually they come in at different times, whether it's, a minute or two apart. And I usually ask the guys, what's going on? Is there anything specific that I can be praying for you for? And, there's this guy comes in there. No one knows who he is unless you're probably from California or
Harvard.
Yeah, exactly. So it was one of the most pure, because most of these guys are always, for my health and for my family and for my travel. It's always the same cookie cutter thing, And this guy, Jeremy, comes in and he's just the most purest, honest, more humble and, just open praise. Like, I don't know what's going to happen next week. It's the deadline. They're going to do cuts. At the time, I think there were 4 point guards on the Knicks roster. He was the only one that didn't have a guaranteed contract. So obviously, he's not playing. They don't have to pay him if they cut him.
Yeah.
So obviously, he's the guy that's going to get cut. And
man out.
Yeah, exactly. So I walked out of that chapel, and I don't know why. Like, I just kept on thinking about this guy. So I sent a message to a couple of my friends, and I was just like, there's this guy that came to chapel last night, and you won't know who he is, but his name is Jeremy Lin, and can you just keep this guy in your prayer? I don't know what's going to happen with him next week, but I just been thinking about him, and the guy, his name, he just kept on coming up again, and I just kept on thinking about him. And I'm not saying this had anything to do with me. I'm sure there was multiple other factors. Less than a week later, Linsanity happened. Linsanity happened.
That's awesome.
So you're talking about going from probably getting cut the following week.
Did he specifically pray for, like, I need to make the team or something? Or I need minutes? Was he talking about like basketball?
No, I think he just I just don't know what's going to happen.
Okay.
Just pray, it's just for God to guide him in that. And I'm telling you, man, Linsanity was the next thing. And obviously
awesome.
that was like a month, the biggest thing in sports for like a month. So I think that was probably one of the coolest things that I've ever seen. So now I challenge the guys, like, be authentic with what's going on in your life. And we know that you want you to be healthy. We know that you're going to travel, and we know that you have families, but what's really going on in your life,
Yeah. I think a lot of times when I pray, it's, I feel like I'm taking things for granted if I don't thank for the simple things that are obvious, like for having, being healthy and being, having great parents or something. Like, these are things I want to thank the Lord for. But maybe I need to be a little more specific, because you feel selfish if you just if something that's really important in my life would be, say, I want this podcast to blow up, and speaking about that and not touching on the things that got you to where you're at.
Right, exactly.
It's kind of,
and it's a good balance too, man. It's not there's a great, I think we ought to have a balance. I don't think we should always just be the, God, this is Jimmy, here's some things I want you to give me.
Right.
And so it's not just about me, because I think we learn a lot having, when we don't have, I think sometimes our greatest time spiritually is when we have to struggle through something, and we have to learn something about ourselves that we wouldn't have learned had everything we asked for been given to us. And you can probably look back and say, there are things that I was like, I prayed for these things to happen in my life years ago, and you look back and I was like, man, I'm so thankful that those things didn't happen.
Yeah.
And so I think that, but I also don't think we should withhold our desires. So if there's things that we're passionate about that we think are good things, and we think that, if I believe that my podcast could be a good thing for the world, why I always say this with me, that because I can be sometimes reserved about wanting to be too upfront and to be seen too much. And I always have to remind myself that there's a lot of bad people who are seen all the time.
Right.
And if people don't see me and other good people, then all they see is shady people. All they see is bad people. Yep. So we need a voice too.
If you're going to be upfront, just make it be a positive influence.
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
So you talked about adding value to women in the new guy code. Yeah. And you talked about, you brushed on it earlier with the girl who you didn't want to waste her time, and she ended up meeting the man of her dreams. Yeah. That hit home with me, because at first it's kind of like, well, how am I supposed to add value to this person I don't know? And if I'm not interested in them, we're just going to cross paths and then keep it moving. Mm-hmm. But people are brought into life for reasons. Yeah. And that seemed to be your reason with her. Yeah. Talk a little bit about that, about adding value to women that you interact with.
These are tough things to say, because sometimes, even not only from other guys, sometimes I get some of the most harsh criticism from women. And because, am I trying to look down on women? Why do why do you think we need your, why should they think?
They probably have that aspect, and also they think, because I have sex, you must think I'm not good enough for you, or something. That type
I don't think that,
judgment and whatnot.
It's funny, I was having this conversation with somebody the other day, like, people, I don't know what this assumption is, that people have this assumption that women are like crawling down my door trying to get to me or something. I'm like, where are these invisible women that everybody assumes just wants to be
some that want to be the first one. Though. They're the chosen one.
Yeah, no, it's not even like that. And that, just like I said, I try to be very honest and upfront. Trust me, man. One of the things that I always have to even protect from is that it's not that they're going to want to have sex with me, it's that I'm going to want to have sex with them. So it's not like I'm some kind of guy sitting up on some mountain and everyone's climbing up to get me. I understand my own temptation, my own flesh, and my own maleness as well too. And imagine if 90% of us had to spend times in our lives, 9 months out of a year, carrying another human being in our lives. You know, I think there's just so many things that women have to go through in life that we as men never have to.
I've been hearing recently that it's closer to 10 months pregnancy.
Yeah.
Everyone always says 9.
Yeah.
And I think it's like almost 10.
Well, you know, well, imagine though. You know, I think there's just certain things women have to go through that men don't have to go through. You know, one of the things that I always think about, like, you know, if you go out in the middle of the night, you decide, you know, you want to go clear your head and go for a jog. You don't sit around thinking, man, some dude's gonna jump out and rape me. You know what I mean? Like, they have to think about that. That's a real issue. You know, they're on a college campus and they feel something. They're inspired to go write something because they want to create something. They can't just get up and go to the lab. That's crazy. You know, that's not safe. Like, you never had to think about that. Yeah. And one of the things I learned, I saw this in South Africa, and I wrote about this as well too, because at Gulliver, because the parallel between Gulliver, which is a wealthy private school here in Miami, and Mpumalanga, South Africa, there I saw something like two common threads, and you see what women have to deal with throughout the world. These girls at Gulliver recently, right, just invented a straw that tracks date rape drugs. So they can put the straw in their drinks. Girls can bring this drink to the bar, and they can put
it changes the color.
Yeah, so it notices like the most common date rape drugs, and if it changes, then you know that your drink's been spiked, right?
That's interesting,
right? And so that's interesting, and that's brilliant, and that's genius on the part of those girls. Imagine if those girls didn't have to think about that.
Right.
Imagine what they could invent if they didn't have to think about that. You know what I mean? Because that's fight or flight. These are the things. What do I do when I'm fearful, when I'm scared? You know what I mean? So when the woman in Mpumalanga, South Africa, where the rape numbers are so high, if she didn't have to worry about being raped every single day of her life, what could she do to make that society so much better? You know what I mean? Yeah. What could her brain do if this fear didn't have to always be there?
Energy put towards these negative things.
Yeah, exactly. So I always say, man, it's like an offensive line. Tom Brady's not great by himself. I think the Patriots have always had a great offensive line, and I think we do owe it to our women at times to at least create a society where they don't have to worry about some of the things that we naturally don't have to worry about. And I think just small things like that can add value to their life.
They say people are put into your life to either multiply, divide, add, or subtract.
Yeah.
And you want to keep the ones that add or multiply and not divide or subtract. Who's been the biggest influence on you besides your family? I know you speak a lot about your mom, but have you had any mentors or role models besides family members that you kind of have mentored you into this role you're in now?
Not into this role. Well, I think I have a lot of really good friends, and I have a lot. The good thing about it is that there are some who don't understand. Like, even we talked about, you shared your thoughts, but I think people, as much as you may say you don't understand it or you don't necessarily agree, we're always been open in our dialogue and been able to have these conversations. So overwhelmingly, I've had a lot of supporters, and so that's been very, very good. I would say the sad part is a lot of supporters, a lot of friends, like-minded people. I have also been let down by a lot of leaders in this, and I would say when people tell me that they're frustrated with the church and with Christians and people.
One of them.
Exactly.
I grew up Catholic and I'm not anymore. And I'm not even
because
a Christian
you've seen
anymore.
Yeah, exactly. And so I would say, even one of my first experiences being around a pastor, finding out about affairs and children and all this stuff. It's as much as I have supporters and I have friends and I have like-minded people, it's been important for me to carve a new way.
So some of the people that you believed in and had similar beliefs, they weren't living the life that
and it's
they
not
claimed or
exactly.
preached.
Right. And which
is what I'm used to seeing.
Right. And that's what makes it so difficult. And that's why I think authenticity is so important. That's why I always tell you, when we talk about these things and we talk about these values and these objectives and the things that I aspire to, please I don't want anyone to hear me say that these things are easy and these are like I just wake up and I want to do that. No, most of the times the reason why I do read and try to focus is because my natural inclination is to do the opposite.
Sure. I know from playing basketball with you that you have as much testosterone and aggression in you, like me. Like I'm full of those things. I want to fight and I want to curse and I want to yell and I want to like be a man. And all the other things that come with it. And I know you're like that.
Yeah, so I think that's really is being able to carve a new way, because if we can do this, if the new guy code becomes a reality, I think there's so much change that can happen. There's good, positive change that happens in the world. Someone make a comment to me about that they didn't need me to protect their vagina, and I always say, that's always a great comment coming from your Seattle coffee shop, in your place of privilege. Go talk to 300 girls who got kidnapped
who literally need help protecting
their vagina. Talk about the woman who, you go to Central Asia where a woman could be grabbed off the street and a bunch of people would just sit there and watch her and nobody would even try to help her, because that's just normal part of their society. So we can say all these things from a point of comfort and privilege because we don't face those risks every day,
When you were just speaking about mentors maybe letting you down, stuff like that, it reminded me of a time I started working for a real estate company. I really looked up to, it was a man and a woman who ran the company. They were good friends. It was a female CEO, a male CEO that ran the company together. Great, successful company. And I looked up to both of them, and business-wise anyway. And then I thought so family-wise. Maybe a few months into the job, we went on a trip, like the annual convention or whatever. And we're out of town. And I see these men that I looked up to in the company. I want to be like these guys. These guys are making a lot of money. They're successful. They have a happy wife and kids. As soon as we leave town, shit hits the fan. They're calling up chicks from other companies that they screw with every time there's a convention, running around doing things behind their wives' back and talking openly to us about it. And to me, I was like, wait a minute. So the guy I'm working for, this is how he treats his wife. How's he going to treat me?
Exactly.
Why do I want to work for this guy? I went to the woman who ran the company with the guy and told her, I don't know if I want to work for this company. I left the company and I was uncomfortable. Listen, I am far from the holier than thou guy. I don't think my shit doesn't stink. But I didn't think it made sense trusting someone in a position of power that treats his own wife like that.
I'm 100% with you. Actually, I have a principle on that. I don't do business with people who cheat on their spouses, and just for that, like, if you can't,
why would they be honest to you?
Why exactly?
Why?
What would
why
make
do
me
you think you're special?
Exactly. So I think absolutely.
In your opinion, how much does religion play a role in your abstinence? Would you say, if you had to put it on a percentage based on like your own morals and then religion?
I think it's the, and so that's actually a great question, right? I always say this, and Hundo eats. You're a food guy.
Yes, sir.
You're a food guy. So you go to a restaurant, right?
I go to a lot of restaurants.
You go to a lot of restaurants. You're in the toilet. You smell something in the toilet. Somebody's doing number 2, right?
Yeah.
You see the chef walk out of the you right? The chef walks out. Are you and he's going back into the kitchen to make your food. Are you happy about that?
If he is there a conversation
See,
about if he washed his hands or not?
No, it doesn't matter what he washed his hand. You're thinking about it though, right?
Yeah.
Because the chef who's preparing your food just got out of the toilet doing the nasty.
Yeah.
And you saw that, and it makes you uncomfortable. Because of the position that I'm in, I can't say what you do or what anybody else does. There are certain people, for me, that need me to live a certain way. And so is it always fair? Do I always like it? Do I feel sometimes like I'm, that I'm isolated, that I'm by myself, that I'm in? Do I feel that way sometimes? Absolutely. But there's a chance that you may not feel the way about me if you knew that I had this trail of relationships that were broken, that didn't work out, and then you understand what I'm saying?
Sure.
So ultimately, for the greater good, I understand that in my role as who I am, as a chaplain, as a minister, as a new guy code guy, that doesn't mean that things can't happen, but you respect me a lot more because there's no story. There's not a list of stories back there to go to. So it's not necessarily, we understand that people use the bathroom, but you're a little bit uncomfortable with the chef using the bathroom in your presence.
You're talking to the right guy. Like, I'm the kind of guy who gets uncomfortable about that type of stuff.
And so for me, unfortunately, I'm a chef in the bathroom if I don't watch some of my actions.
Yeah.
You know, and Paul says this in his writings. If me eating food causes somebody to go off track, man, then I'll just become a vegan. You know, and so I'll become a vegan if it's going to cause you to go off track.
Yeah.
So if
Make that sacrifice.
Yeah, exactly. If me having a beer causes you to become an alcoholic, I'll just have a beer at home.
Okay. Do you feel like you'd be letting yourself down if you had sex at this point?
No.
Let's say you were dating somebody and you had a moment of weakness and you had sex with her and then you never did again and then you kept living as...
Yeah. No, I think you're thinking that I'm too perfect. You know, just like I said, you know, I've had, you know, just like I said, in over this period of my life, there has been challenges. You know, there have actually been lines that have been crossed sexually in that time.
Do you feel guilt? Do you feel shame?
There can be. No, it's not that, you know, ultimately because, you know, what, again, a part of my belief is, you know, for God so loved the world that he sent his son, you know, not to bring shame and guilt, but I don't think that guilt comes from God. I don't think that shame comes from God, but I think there's accountability. And I think it's for me, I have to look at each situation and say, does this truly represent what I believe and what I want this relationship to be, you know? And ultimately, and I think part of it too is like, I haven't necessarily been in a whole lot of long-term relationships. So for me to be in that situation consistently is not necessarily healthy. So it's not really a issue of guilt and shame, but I think responsibility, accountability.
That sucks. It kind of sucks though.
Yeah. No, well,
it's just a sacrifice.
Yeah, and I mean,
because I think you should be able to have those meaningful, long-lasting relationships that everybody.
No,
does.
And I'm not saying that's not for it. I think that's part of I think some of those things are personal and personality. Like I think we talked about at lunch. You know, I think you can find out as much as you need to know about a person within 3 weeks, and you can confirm it within 6. Yeah. And then also too, you know, I understand, and this is something that I have to become comfortable with, that I'm not for everyone, you know? And I think most people that I know respect me, they support me, they encourage me.
I think that's safe to say.
Yeah, but I understand that, you know, I live a certain kind of way, and that's not for everyone. And I think there are times where people would say, well, Che is great, but man, that's another level, you know? And that's fine. You know, I once had a great conversation with an ex-NBA executive. I was asking him about Magic Johnson because he was very close to Magic Johnson in his prime. And I was like, what's it like coaching Magic Johnson? And he says, you know, the thing about Magic is that Magic brought this intensity to practice every single day. And it's not necessarily, people say, well, he's 6'9" and he's this and he's that. Mm-hmm. There's this like little zone that people who do great things, they go into this little space.
Yeah.
And is it possible that of the thousands of players that come along that somebody could have replicated that, or even replicated Jordan, or replicated? Yeah, but you have to be willing to go to that extra space that not a lot of people are willing to go to.
I feel like someone like him or someone like yourself who lives at a certain standard, you kind of force that standard on those around you. Yeah. Not in a pushy way, not in a...
I make people uncomfortable. Make people uncomfortable.
Yes.
And I have no clue why. I have never done anything to say, like, you know, I want people to be, but I make people uncomfortable.
I think so.
Yeah, people assume that I know their story when they look at me. They think that I've read their book, you know?
It reminds me of, like, growing up playing sports, there would be, like, even if I was, like, better, you know, than this kid at a sport, maybe he was just, like, one of those free throw shooters who doesn't miss, and it's just, like, man, why can't I shoot like that? Like, why can he do? And I would feel this like why is this person so perfect?
Yeah, and it's
that. I think that's I would be uncomfortable.
Yeah, and
like then, he's doing something that I'm not doing, and I need to figure out how to do that.
Right, and that's that's a huge mistake for anyone who looks at me, because I'm furthest from perfect. You know what I mean? Obviously, again, going back to basketball, how many times have you seen me flare up on a basketball court? Yeah. More than not only anyone of my position, more than anyone, you know what I mean?
Yeah, like, you're the loudest guy on the team.
Exactly. So I mean, anyone who knows me know that I'm far from perfect. But I think people understand that I understand what my calling is, that I'm committed to my call, and I'm committed to every day. And I think this is really it. Most people say they want to do something in the world and they want to make the world better. So they share a post or they write a comment. I get up every day fully committed to doing that.
And you live it.
Yeah, exactly.
I know you do.
You know, so it's like, and it's not, this isn't about abstinence or sex. Like every single day of my life, I wake up trying to think about something to make the world better.
Yeah.
And so I can understand that most people just want to cruise. You know what I mean? People are just trying to get by. I'm just trying to make it to 80, man, and not have, and not have some kind of disease. Where I'm trying to get all I can out of this thing, and I think that does make people uncomfortable.
I agree. There's a story in one of your books, and you spoke about it in the TED Talk, about your mom likes to tell stories.
Yeah.
About your dad being caught in the home of your mom's father or your mom's family.
He's at my my parents' house.
Back in Jamaica, set the stage, tell the story, because I like that story, because it kind of shows where your morals came from.
Yeah.
The nature versus nurture part of everything.
Yeah. So part of that story. So one thing you have to understand, like we don't have like a history of abuse in our family at all. We don't have,
You're lucky.
Yeah. My grandfather wasn't hitting my mom, or he wasn't hitting my grandma. But he was temperamental, and my grandfather had this shop at the top of the town. So in Jamaica, you have these little small shops. So if you own one of these shops, you go to the market, you basically buy in bulk. It's like you went to Costco or a BJ's and you bought in bulk and you sold it to the community.
You drove like the hour to get the stuff, and then you brought it back to the village.
To the local. Yeah,
and then they can walk there.
Exactly. Yeah, so people would literally come there and like, I want 2 Advils, not an Advil bottle. Like you'd go there because you had a headache, so you got enough to solve the headache for the moment, right? Yeah. So my grandfather was noticeably temperamental. You know what I mean? Like he would kick dudes out of his shop all the time. It was like this old Jamaican, come out of his shop. Everybody remembers Olen. That's what we called him. So he wasn't the kind of guy you wanted to be messing with. You don't want to be at his house sneaking around if he didn't know you were supposed to be there. And my mom, one day they're younger and they're starting to date a little bit. My mom invites him over because he had gone out to the shop, and my grandma and him had gone away to market to get some stuff for the shop. My parents are hanging out when they're younger, and as he's getting ready to leave, my mom is still nervous, and my mom will still get nervous telling this story right now.
This is at the very beginning of their relationship, getting to know each other.
Exactly. And my mom, you ask her to tell her this story, she still is shaking when she's telling the story. And she's like, okay, well, you need to leave now so he doesn't come back and see you here. Well, he's walking up the stairs and runs into my grandfather on the way out. And my mom assumes that hell's about to break loose, you know what I mean? Because that's what she expects from knowing my grandfather's personality of seeing another man in the house with his daughter. And they're just having this normal, casual conversation. And really what happened is that my dad would go to the shop in the evenings. He would go about his business, but he had always impressed my grandfather as being a stand-up guy, and everything that he did. So, when I've told this story and I've talked to my cousins and talked to people who are older, they would say the majority of guys that would come into that shop, if they would have been in that situation, my grandfather would have lost it on them. But my dad showed character in that moment, showed that he was a man of character even before he was in the house. And because it was him in the house with his daughter, he didn't lose it like he normally would have, And so I think a lot of what I get a lot of character from my dad. I've just, so many things about him I just respect so much, So I would say, going back, you said outside of family, but within family, I can definitely say I look to my dad for values and morals and.
That's a cool story, man.
I'm keep it 100.
We've reached the Keeping It a Hundo segment of the show. Yeah. You can relax now.
Cool.
Maybe not. I'm going to try to make you a little uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If there's like one celebrity or person on TV or something that you could smash.
Oh my gosh.
Who would it be?
Oh my God.
Now, I know you don't like to objectify. I'm using these words.
Uh-huh.
Is there somebody you have a little celebrity crush on?
Ah, man, celebrity crush. Dang. What's her name from Saving the Last Dance? The sister, not the girlfriend, who's married to the ex-Eagles football player, the ex-football player. Asamoah or whatever?
Nandi
Kerry
Asamoah.
Washington. I think Kerry Washington is beautiful.
Scandal.
Huh?
Scandal.
Yeah.
She's. I don't watch Scandal, but she's the star of Scandal.
Yeah, I think Kerry Washington is.
Kerry Washington's dope.
Is beautiful.
All right.
So
well-
not to smash.
Not
Like,
to
I
smash.
think
You just
Kara
like she thinks she's attractive.
Yeah, she's a beautiful woman.
All right.
Yeah.
Bigger accomplishment: getting a book published or being abstinent for 12 years or whatever the number is now.
Oh, definitely. Let me say, pursuing abstinence. Yeah, pursuing abstinence is definitely the bigger accomplishment. In our area, anyway, it's easy to publish.
But pursuing abstinence, why do you say pursuing? Because I could say I'm pursuing it, but I could be failing.
Yeah.
You are successful, no?
Yeah.
Successfully pursuing.
Yeah, successfully pursuing. I mean, obviously, just like I said, I've had my own hiccups.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but when you say a hiccup,
but yeah, I'm not consistent. Yeah, a hiccup doesn't mean like I'm.
have you
consistent.
had sex?
Huh?
Recently?
No.
You're just saying you messed around or something?
No,
or-
no. I've had my stumbles along that journey. Now, am I going around? Okay, this leads to that. No. I'm very good at. Okay, this was a stumble. This was an error. Now let's reverse course. You know what I mean?
Does that usually end the relationship though?
Not necessarily.
No.
No.
Another tough one, tough to objectify, but white women or black women?
Oh God. You remember I had our one of my roommates from college. You remember Carl Walker?
Yeah, I still talk to Carl.
Yeah, Carl. I was at a basketball game this year, and his wife comes up to me and he says, "Che, I want to ask you a question." And he's like, "I don't want you to be offended." I was like, "What are you asking me?" And I think she's gonna ask me if I'm gay, and she's like, "Do you date black girls?" And I'm like, where did I develop this reputation? I think I'm more into who the person is.
To me, I thought you were more open. I don't see you as like, oh, he only likes this or he only likes that. I didn't
I'm very
know.
open. Yeah, I've dated and liked and been attracted to everyone.
Okay. Top 5 rappers, dead or alive?
Ooh, top 5 rappers. Ooh, good one. So this is just like I said, don't always agree with them, but yeah, Jay-Z won for longevity. I think in a bubble, obviously, you have to go with Biggie and Pac for what they did, but obviously they both died before they were 25. So
not as prolific as some people out there, but
yeah.
well, Biggie isn't anyway.
Yeah, Nas. Who would be 5?
I'm not arguing with any of these.
Yeah. 5. You know what? In his time, being a South Florida kid, I was really feeling Trick Daddy at his time. You know,
I love it.
Yeah,
You gotta take
time,
a local guy.
Yeah,
That's the first trick I've got,
Yeah.
but I get the other 4 are on a lot of people's lists, including mine.
There's nothing like a South Florida dude. You know,
Yeah,
like calling out cities that you're familiar with.
Exactly.
Yeah,
It made things feel more important.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Do you think religion is worth it? For all the war and all the death and all the sexual abuse,
Yeah.
everything that it's caused, is it still worth it? Is it still the path to heaven?
You know, I don't. I think we're going to have to really. We're going to get to a point where we have to really define what religion is. So, despite what you may think, I'm actually not a huge fan of religion. I think religion has a tendency to become corrupt. I think it does.
Polarizing.
Yeah, it's polarizing. Nor do I necessarily, going back to scripture for me, I've never seen a focus on that necessarily Jesus came to establish religion. He came to establish a way of life. You know, where religion came about, really, a lot of times, for instance, early Christians, a plague would break out in the city, and people would just run away and leave the dying. And groups of people would stay back and hang out with the people who were dying. And so people started to say, let's call them Christians because they act like Christ. So somewhere along the line, we became religious and we wanted to get tied in with government. We wanted to get tied into different institutions. And I think it always, it has a way of diluting the purity of the message. So I'm not always necessarily a big fan of religion.
I am not. I'm anti-organized religion.
Yeah. But at the same time, one of the things that it's easy for us sometimes. Again, we sit in a place of comfort. And sometimes I want to be I don't want to come off as being religious, and I don't want to act like I'm pushing. But sometimes I forget that I can say things to people, and sometimes people need to know that there's something bigger than them out there. You know what I mean? Sometimes there are certain things that happen in our lives that are so uncertain, that are so like, what the heck is going on? And the idea that it doesn't matter what happens, there's something bigger than us that loves us, that cares about us, that is very comforting to me, and that is comforting to people. I would argue that me and you are very close in our ideas on religion.
We may be.
Yeah, but at the same time, and when I say too about when we talk about even God, I always tell people, like, don't listen to anything because I say it, but why are you so curious about it? That there must be something there that makes you so curious about it.
Why the book, though? Why the Bible? Why is that the book to live by? Because I'm not sure about the Bible.
Jesus presents the Jesus message presents a radical way of living. That let's say it's not God's word, but let's just say a couple decided that they were going to live it out themselves, just as a way of doing things. And they decided that the husband said, I'm going to love you greater than I love myself. And the wife said, I'm going to love you greater than I love myself. That level of selflessness is transformative. And that's why even though Gandhi was a Hindu, Gandhi actually practiced Jesus. Martin Luther King practiced Jesus. And this was why we admire Martin Luther King, because the easy thing was to say, hate whitey, kill whitey. He said, love them. They just don't understand who they are. Martin Luther King would say, America just doesn't understand that it's better than this. He didn't say, you're terrible, America. He said, you're better than this. You know what I mean? And that was Jesus. You know, so I think that's where, even if you don't necessarily believe that it's inspired, that it's God. When people can think about others outside of themselves, we know that the world is always better that way. And we know that when people only think about themselves and what they can do for themselves, then the world is always worse off.
You played some football at the U. Top 3 University of Miami football players of all time.
Oh man, I'm certainly not qualified to talk about.
You're not the historian or whatnot.
Yeah, I'm not the historian. I would say modern.
Yeah, let's talk modern.
Yeah, modern. If we're going to say modern, let's go back to, I think we could go back to the 80s, and I think that becomes easy. Michael Irvin, Ray Lewis, and I think you could, and there may even be greater than that, you know what I mean? Because you've got it seems like you have so many great players. I mean, Warren Sapp. I'll say this. Outside of LeBron James, the most impressive athlete I've ever seen is Sean Taylor.
Sean Taylor. I thought you were going to say that.
Yeah, he's the most impressive athlete I've ever seen. Outside
that you've been around and
exactly.
actually seen with your own eyes.
Yeah, that guy just had everything. He had everything, like bigger, faster, stronger, nastier. He was just the perfect football player.
Yeah.
And so he's, I miss him, and but he's talking about just an impressive athlete.
Yeah. Hey, that's the answer. Top 3 of all time, Sean Taylor.
Yeah, exactly.
Steel cage match. Who you got? Che Guevara versus Michael Che.
Oh my God, Che. Michael Che.
You gonna take Michael Che?
Yeah, exactly. I'm in Miami.
All right, so the winner of that has to take on Che Scott.
Yeah.
Who you got? Che Scott versus Michael Che.
Yeah, go with Michael Che.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Damn. Do you remember where and when you were the last time you had sex?
Oh my gosh, I do.
Any details?
No details.
No?
No.
College?
No details.
Okay. All right, last question.
Yeah.
Death row meal. What are you having? Hundo Eats, We got to talk food
gosh.
to close it out.
It's funny. I'm the complete opposite of you. And
as far as what?
When it comes to food. Like, maybe I need to just have better food experiences.
You mean that food isn't that important to you?
No, food for me. Like when I travel, I'm like just trying to find something that'll give me some kind of nourishment.
Just to give you energy to keep moving.
Yeah, food for me is what keeps me from dying. That's what I mean? I'm dead serious. Like,
eat to live.
Yeah.
I live to eat.
Yeah, like
two different things.
Yeah, I was like, if I could find a way not to not eat and not die.
You don't want to start hanging out with me more though, because it's gonna get expensive.
Yeah,
trust me, it's expensive.
Yeah, because it's funny when you see me, I go on some of these trips and people are talking about, oh well, this is what these this restaurant and all this stuff. I'm like, what are you talking about?
That's not your thing.
I go to a coffee shop, grab a coffee and a
That's crazy.
and a salad, man. I'm
You
grab
do
a
some
wrap.
great traveling,
Yeah.
but you're leaving out this huge piece of
I'm
traveling.
I'm trying to find like a fruit stand, like somebody will make me a smoothie or something, like, you know, with soy milk or almond milk.
Oh man.
And that's it. Yeah, that's the.
So we don't even have a death row meal?
It's funny. I wouldn't even know what to do, you know, because
I know what you would. You would probably have something. Your mother's home cooking, something that reminds you of home.
I do like Jamaican food. So
Yeah.
I guess like a curry chicken meal would
Love
be a
it.
great meal. Yeah,
Some plantains or some rice and peas,
exactly. Rice and peas, curry chicken,
ginger beer, maybe.
Yeah,
I love
a red
ginger
stripe. Yeah,
beer. Red stripe.
yeah.
Okay. That's about it, Shay.
Appreciate it, man.
All right. Thanks for
for
doing this. That was my conversation with Chase Scott. This episode differed quite a bit from last week. I hope you enjoyed the contrast between Diamond and Che. If you have any questions for either of them concerning their lifestyles or their profession, feel free to leave those questions underneath the comments section in the podcast app or on Facebook or Instagram on the posts where I advertise their podcast. There's got to be some questions I didn't ask that you were hoping I did and I just dropped the ball. Very interesting people with very different lifestyles. If you know of anybody else who you think would be a great guest to have on Keepin' It a Hundo, please leave it in my comments section as well. Make sure you're downloading and subscribing and continue to enjoy listening to Keepin' It a Hundo. I'm Matty Hundo. See you next week.